Okay, so I was looking at your Project 3 submissions and it looks good. Um, I'm gonna, I'll grade them. Some of them I've graded already. The rest of them I'll grade by tonight. But in terms of like feedback, I may not get to it until tomorrow. I have to substitute for someone, so it's setting me behind a little bit. But the feedback, as long as I'll give you feedback, but if you want additional feedback on your project, just let me know, and I can. I'm taking an online um, class on how to improve my online class, and so I'm gonna try, and if I can do it, I'm gonna try and use video responses to your projects. So that's another reason it's gonna kind of take a little bit extra. And you guys are going to be kind of the guinea pigs on it because I've never done it this way. And then I'm also, um, it's a program or a system called Harmonize. So I'm going to try it on you guys and see how it goes. If it goes well, I'll use it for the other schools. But um, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind your feedback at the end of it. Okay, so let's look at your um, actually, maybe we can just do the feedback right now. Will that work? Yeah. I am going to try the video responses, but let me see. Share. Okay. I don't want to show you the grade book. Wait, hold on one second. We want to be on the. Oops. Okay, desktop, no. Hopefully you can see that okay. All right, let's take a look at your projects. And I want to sort them the other way. All right, let's start with Matt's here. So what I meant to say is the video feedback and stuff I'm going to try and help you with on Project 4. And we're going to look at, I'll give you feedback right now on this one. And then the grading I'll do tonight. And then if you want more feedback on Project 3, just let me know and then we can connect that way. Okay. All right. So this is Adventure Time. It's one of my favorites. I liked it because there's not that many things that me and my son could sit and watch together, but Adventure Time was one of them. And then later on, when he got older, it was Rick and Morty. But when he was a kid, we would watch Adventure Time all the time. So I re I like this. So it's colorful. It's a nice object. The only criticism I would have right here is that there's almost n no volume, right? So this is pretty much there's kind of a bend here, but this is a pretty much a 2D. You know, it does stick up, but there's no enclosed volume. So what I might suggest is that these shapes maybe could bend around. So there is sort of a crease right here, but to get the volume that we're looking for, I'd like to see these sort of bent almost in a cone, like a cone shape. So in other words, they're bending all the way around, just to give it a little more 3D. my favorite episode was, oh, what was the guy? It was the thing that was sort of projected on the wall. Anyway, I can't remember who that is. Do you guys remember? Matt, do you remember that episode where it was like this guy, this sort of thing projected on the wall, and then he was granting the dog like three wishes, and then the dog was like, "Oh, I'll have a sandwich," and then he was like, "Don't waste your wish on that. I can make you a sandwich." That was that was the best. All right, Jessica, we have a dragon. So sometimes this one came out really good, but generally I don't like the like paper cranes and dragons because there's not a lot of enclosed volume. But I don't. I went back and I was like, oh, I didn't mention the dragon part. I just mentioned the crane part. So the this one works out because first of all, the paper's um, excellent for this. Like it creates a feel. It gives you kind of these extra sort of contour lines that are interesting. And if I look at this really closely, there is kind of enclosed volume in the body, which is better than doing a paper crane. But in the wings and stuff, there's not that much enclosed volume. Uh, so this one works. I think the paper itself sort of saves it in a way, and it ended up a really nice object. Just needs a little more enclosed volume. All right. So this is perfectly, this I would consider enclosed because um, you have this sort of surface here with these contours and towards the inside. So in other words, this reads as a ball and a lot of the information is external and a lot of the space and stuff is internal. And so even on a cone like this, I would consider that enclosed space. And then when you put them together, it encloses these sort of okay, this is called an interstitial space, and it also makes kind of an enclosed volume. So this works out, and I like these because when you work in this way, if you work from a template, a lot of times you can make these things that are useful. So I feel like this could go on a Christmas tree. It feels like a nice sort of decoration. So that one works. Perfect. Good. All right. We are at Marcel's. Was this Disney? Disneyland. Yeah. So this is a pop-up. I really like it. So it's if you think about the enclosed volume, all of that, if we look at it from the side, that doesn't enclose a lot of volume, but it's a pop-up. So as I mentioned, we're looking at it from the front. So all of this is enclosed volume, right, from this perspective. And so there's several layers of it that really make this feel like an object that's kind of coming at you. And so on the uh, on the pop-up itself, I think I would have like if you would have put like a hard backing on it, so that this thing, doesn't like sort of um, waver like that. And one thing I would have done is I would have cut out a few of the windows as voids, right? So that you could see into that space. And this door here, I think I would have cut it out so that it creates a little more um, access to the enclosed volume that's in there, if that makes sense. But um, the I think what makes this is the drawing over the top. It adds a lot of detail and kind of narrative. So this one also works. Very similar, in my opinion. So there's, from the front and even this sort of angle shot, you can kind of tell that there's enclosed volume. In other words, that space in behind there is a closed volume. It's enclosed from the back and the front and a little bit from the side. So this works, and kind of like Marcel's, it's the extra work put in on the painting. It's very like beautifully painted. Like it has a nice feel, and um, the gold part, um, sort of, I think just color wise, it sort of works and integrates with the thing. Um, anyway, so this one also works out. I also would have put maybe a backing on this, but or I think in this case, maybe you could just paint in a border so that it's these edges sort of are resolved in a way. All right. Okay, this is excellent. Uh, so this is Jared's piece, and I like it because it just seems like there was stuff around, and it just was a thing that was just decided to be built. uh, the the line paper doesn't bother me at all. So I think in some cases, depending on the context and stuff, in this case, it looks like maybe an office worker was sitting around and was like, "Nah, I'm going to make something." So there's this kind of interesting office sort of, uh, impromptu sort of feel about it. So if I'm looking at this in terms of enclosed volume, there's plenty of enclosed volume. Every sort of like piece kind of encloses volume. So that part's taken care of. And as it sort of comes together, it has this interesting uh, gesture, I suppose. Uh, yeah, so that looks great. Also, it's another example, and this is important going into Project 4, that you don't have to spend money on particularly the last two projects. You can get through the last two projects without spending anything. So I think this is a good example of just materials that were around and something good came out of it. All right. So this thing looks great. It's made with those kind of triangular modules, and the color is. So this is another thing that looks like it could be useful. Like I don't know what you'd put in there, but you could definitely put something in there. So there's two kinds of enclosed volume here. Uh, each shape, even though it's very little, it makes this sort of thick wall, and I consider that enclosed volume. Um, but it also makes an area that's enclosed volume. So I was looking at this earlier, and as it sits on the table, I would consider that like enclosed volume. But as just a ring, it's I almost want it to have either a top or a bottom, just to enclose, just to finish off all of the, just so that it's officially an enclosed volume. You could even have it so that I don't I don't know. Um, so that it got smaller and smaller so that it can make a dome or a bowl. And then if you put that upside down, it would be a bowl, I guess. And on the top, it would be a dome. Um, but this is it's a beautiful item. So, and I think officially, if it sits on a table, um, it passes the enclosed volume criteria. Great. This is similar. So just the body and these sort of put together, you can kind of see it. You can kind of see it better here. All these little spaces in between, um, I'll count as enclosed volume, so it sort of makes the thickness here. And this one I like. It seems festive, and it definitely works as uh, just a kind of fun item. All right, going. Okay, good. All right, definitely festive. Oops, let's see, chat. Prismo, thank you. I'll make you a sandwich. All right, let's go down to Augustine and Augustine, the last one. Okay. All right. So this is good. Enclosed volume. All of these are enclosed volume. Oh, you know what's good is even the stem has a little enclosed volume, right? So that's a nice touch. And the uh, vase or container also has its cone shape, so that's enclosed volume as well. And the reason I keep stressing the enclosed volume is that's the key from from going from 2D to 3D is having this sort of space that you surround. That sort of just helps define the 3D part. So that's why I keep kind of going over it over and over again. But this is nice. This might be a good one to go back and paint later. The the forms are great. That paper, the copy paper does read a certain way, so it does have this sort of uh, it can be kind of bland. So this thing I think I would go back and paint, but otherwise it's a great project. Okay, so that was so I'm gonna stop the share. So that's it for project 3. Did you guys have any comments or questions about project 3? All right, so overall it was pretty good. The um, the last thing I want to say about project 3 is the uh, the documentation was super good, and I'm just going to ask you to keep doing that for project 3 or project 4, your final project. And also a few kind of like there was some confusion about the attending these meetings. So if you attend the meetings, it doesn't automatically count as your attendance. You have to go in to the assignment and the class discussion assignment and type your name in. And then if you're watching this and you didn't attend, then you have to write the summary, right, which is 500 words. So hopefully that clears that part up. And that's it for project 3. Um, okay, so I need to pause. Let's take a short break, 5 minutes, and I need to freshen up my coffee, and then we'll come back and start in on project 4. Just to summarize, I'll talk about project 4, and then um, some of the things about grading, and then going into the last part of the semester. I want to make sure we're clear on. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So let's be back. Let's be back at 8:30. Okay. Okay. Let's see, we're recording still. Good. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at project 4. I'm going to skip right ahead to the examples, and I want to show you what some of the other students have done. Oh, first of all, so if you're here at the meeting, you just go to the project 4 meeting attendance, and then you do the text entry and just type in your name. And uh, so if any of you had questions, that's how you get credit for um, the meeting. And keep in mind, this meeting is worth 4 points. So if you're here, you just get 4 points. And to get the 4 points, if you're not here, is you have to write the summary. Hope that's clear. All right, let's take a look at some of the examples for Project 4. Okay. So I would like you guys to first know that Project 4, I don't want you to spend any money on it. I want you to make it with things that you just sort of have around, right? So if you have, and this is the part where I'll ask you, I know it's a cliche, but I'll ask you to think outside the box in terms of materials, right? So when we think of materials for 3D, we oftentimes think about wood or plaster or clay, very classic traditional ways to build in 3D. But in our case, I want you to think about what's around and what's free and what you can get for free, right? One good resource, and I think I've mentioned this before, one good resource um, is if you're on Facebook, there's a page called Buy Nothing. And Buy Nothing, you just look and see what people are giving away. And sometimes you can find really great material. Sometimes you can find great stuff on the Buy Nothing. People just give stuff away. Um, so it's a great resource. Another thing to think about is, just instead of thinking about your trash as trash or recyclables, you can start to think about those kind of things as material that you can use. You can use stuff that's outdoors. You know, a student worked with leaves and actually coated the leaves with Elmer's glue, and it made this really like tough material that they sewed together and formed their project. Let me show you some of these, and then we'll get back to the materials part. So this is a container that there's a rule about making books because what a lot of students were doing was just grabbing a book and cutting a hole in it and then saying, okay, my project's done. So the rule is you can make a book, like a secret book that has a hidden compartment. But what I'd like you to do is to you have to make your own book. In other words, you have to like fold and bind the paper yourself. You have to make the cover, and you have to make it attached somehow so that it closes and it shuts, so that if you turn it upside down, that stuff doesn't fall out. Okay. This one, I need to talk to you about narrative, right? So this is a personal container, So I want it to be personal to you. So there's a couple ways you can do this in terms of narrative, right? So one way is to think about this project as a metaphor, right? For you. Like, what is your exterior like? What is your interior like? Is there a difference? Are you somebody that's like really like warm and outgoing in the surface, but then on the inside you're kind of like shut off and closed? Or is it the opposite? So I'm showing you this because this guy was the opposite. This was a student that uh, he was really cold in the beginning, kind of shut off, didn't talk to people. He was almost a little snarky, like condescending, and very sort of cold, right? Then, as the semester went on, people got to know him. Turns out he was just sort of shy, and he was absolutely a sweetheart, absolute sweetheart. So he would share his materials. He would offer people rides. He just was like kind of in the beginning. You have to get through that outside, and then what you find is something very kind of warm, right? So this was his project, and it's very much like him. So the outer shell is very cold, very sort of like guarded, right? And then he worked I think he worked in Hollywood maybe as a set something or other, but he was able to like cut up metal and sort of work with metal. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, there's a switch right here, and when you flipped it on the inside, what you would see is a heart. That's a heart right there. And the rest of it was just sort of like blue fur. It was very, very friendly, non-threatening, right? And that matched his personality so perfectly because he was warm and approachable once you got to know him. But if you didn't know him, he was pretty much shut off, right? Okay, so that was a perfect metaphor for him, and that's the kind of narrative I want you guys to think about. Narrative is big in this project. That's why I call it the personal container. Okay. So narratively speaking, I think this one it's a good model. This one, I like the materials probably the best. The reason is I assigned them the project and I told the students like, look, you can use stuff from outdoors, you can use stuff you find around here. So this student immediately, this was a face-to-face class in Long Beach. This class, I mean, this student went outside and just collected pine needles, and there was thread in the classroom, and there was some yarn, I guess. And so the student just started to weave these pine needles around and over and over again, and ended up with this basket. And she was so tenacious as a worker. She was finished before anybody was finished. And then she we discussed like what we could do after because she was done already. And she decided to like make this book. So she made this book and did the binding herself, did the cover, and the book was very connected to the basket. So she thought of this as like a picnic basket, and this book she would write in kind of an entry every time she used the basket. So if she would go on a picnic with a friend, she would just write that in there. She would write the friend's name and what they did and etc., what they ate. And so I just thought that was such a nice container and it was very personal and uh, one of the things that I want you to consider is just the quality and trying to create something that's worth something, like something of value to you. The worst case scenario is you make something and you don't like it and you just toss it afterwards. That's the worst case scenario for me. I want you to make something that has value. And if you look, I put a lot of extra emphasis when I grade this project. So this is basically 40% of your grade, you know. And so I want you to like think about that and think about making these things what I call boutique ready. So in other words, you're not going to sell these things in Target, right? That's not going to be the quality threshold. But if you were asked to sell these in consignment in a boutique store, I want you to make them like boutique quality. So you could put it in a boutique shop and it wouldn't seem like kind of a elementary or intermediate school art project, if that makes sense. All right. So this last one I include because this is one of my favorite students, if I'm being honest. This guy, he was also my first autistic student, and I couldn't reach him the whole semester. And at at uh, the college level, students sign up, and they're not. If there's any kind of disability, they're not required to state it, and there is a rule where we're required not to ask. So we can't ask if there's something, some sort of learning barrier. We can't go just walk up and say, what's happening. So a lot of times the students will like be in class, there's a sort of disengagement because there's a disability and it's sort of not known to the instructor. So that's what happened in this case. And the student, we just weren't connecting on the first three projects. And so finally, on the final project, I was like, how are you gonna make this personal? What do you enjoy doing? And so he said, I enjoy going to the beach and picking up seashells. It's it's my hobby. I do it, at least once a week, right? And so I was like, "Do you want to do your project in seashells?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And then it was on, right? So he he put this together, and it's amazing. So you don't. I wish I had video of it. This was kind of way back, so the video phones weren't great, but uh, the this opens and closes, and so he would keep like just his personal effects and stuff in here, keys and whatnot. But this shell would pivot backwards, so he made this hinge out of shells that actually made a functioning thing. So the front of the shell would poke into that little hole right there, and that was a latch to keep it closed. And in the back, there was just shells that pinned another shell so that the whole thing would pivot up. I mean, it was like really organic, but kind of next level engineering. And so, anyway, to make a long story short, I thought this was really a great project and helped me learn that a lot of times, students on the spectrum, most of the time, there's some sort of passion or skill, and it's just a matter of finding out what it is. We call it finding out what the superpower is. So with Brian, it was shells. All right. So those are the examples. I want to go. Let me stop the share here. So I want to just sort of back up a little bit and present the project. And I wanted to show you the example. So you had a broad idea of what was going on, but the criteria for project 4 is this. I want it to be personal. So if it's some sort of metaphor for you, that's a good way to start. It's You don't have to do it that way. Uh, I used to assign it so that you would make a container that would contain your most precious object, so that's how we would make it uh, personal. So, for example, back in the early 90s, um, they the Berlin Wall existed, and they tore down the Berlin Wall, which divided old communist Germany from democratic Germany. It was a big deal. It was a huge deal. So I had a friend in Germany, and I asked him to break off a chunk of the wall and send it to me, and he did, right? So he got a sledgehammer and he busted off a piece that was kind of like the size of a baseball, and so he sent it to me. And over the years, I would share it with people, right? And now I still have it. The piece is about the size of a quarter, and and I can't break it down anymore. So it's the size of a quarter. Anyway, it's the most, like if I had, it's the most precious sort of object to me, based in history, based in who sent it to me, based in who I shared it with, etc. Right? So that thing, it's a it's a piece of concrete, doesn't mean anything to anyone else but me, and that would be my most precious object. And if I were to make a container for it, I wouldn't just paint up a cardboard box and be like, okay, here it is. I would want people to understand the importance of it. So I might consider making a wooden frame, having a glass, so, make a glass display case for it. I would put a lot of effort into it. So in this project, I want you guys to think about the project as something valuable, right? Or you're containing something valuable. So the narrative part, in a way, is kind of the first thing I'll be looking at. Like, does this mean something to you? And one thing that's essential to this project, it's gonna be, it's gonna come out so much better if it means something to you, right? If you just sort of like, oh, I got to do this assignment, oh, I got to put this together, you might be able to make something interesting, but for the most part, the really good projects are the ones you sort of invest yourself into and give it your best shot to make it boutique quality or make something that's meaningful to you. All right, so that's the overall scope. The second rule is don't spend any money on this, right? Try to spend zero. Try to just make it from stuff that you have around the house. So if you have old clothes, you can use those. Old shoes, people have cut up and used the rubber parts. People have used kind of a weird one was they made it from chicken wings, like the bones from chicken wings. I guess they like to go to Wingstop, and so they just saved all the bones, and it was weird but interesting. You can I had a student bake their container, so they basically like made this container out of cookie sheets, right? And uh, so it looked like a plus shape, like a plus form, but they literally just used stuff in the kitchen to bake this sort of form, and they sort of burnt it so it was crispy around the outer edges, And on the inside, they took a knife and they just cut out all the bread so that it made a container. It was really cool. It was really kind of like an innovative way to approach the project. Um, someone made, speaking of kitchen, someone made a log cabin out of carrots, which was cool. So they used carrots instead of logs, and they used a template to actually like construct this like log home. And it was temporary, right? Because the carrots shrunk and dried up and stuff, and the thing eventually fell apart. But it lasted long enough to sit in the critique and be like a functional um, container. So that was interesting. So there's a lot of like different kind of materials. Think about your trash. Actually, let's do this just real quick. Actually, let me just explain the rest of the criteria. So it has to be personal, has to be free. The container also needs to open and close and shut somehow, right? So it can't just be like, you can't just make a bowl with no lid. It has to shut and stay shut so that whatever's inside, we can turn it over and nothing falls out. So it has to shut somehow. And of course, you can't buy a hinge, you can't buy a latch to keep it shut. You have to like invent this yourself. And uh, so it's going to take some engineering and like being clever with the materials. So one simple way is, if you have a like a box that shuts, if you put a button on one side and a string on the other side and just use it to like wrap it, that's a perfectly good latch, right? So you can have some stuff that pressure fits together. If you have a container with a lid that just gets stuck on, through pressure, that's also fine with me. All right. So make it personal. Don't spend any money. It has to open and close, right? And size wise, there's no limits, either big or small. We've had people make a contain. One student just cut this much off of a broom and hollowed it out and then cut like a cam form so that it would actually lock shut. And what they kept inside was it was a Japanese student that kept his green card or some sort of like important like documentation inside, and it was beautiful. So it was very well done. It was only like this big, and then on the other hand, we've had people make. Um, so one student was like, "Well, I'm my most important object, so I'm just going to make a container for myself." And so there was some eye rolling, but she made a teepee, and it was cool. Like, and she made it. It was probably about 6 feet. No, it was shorter. It was like 5 feet, but she could kind of get in and sit inside there. But it contained her, and it opened and closed and shut, so it fit all the criteria. One student asked me last, no, during the quarantine, if they could make a tree house and could that be a container? And I was immediately like, that sounds great. Like if you were that adventurous, and you want to make something. Then I thought about it, and then I realized I couldn't let them make a tree house for my class because of the liability issue. So in other words, I can't have my student up in a tree with sharp tools. Uh, I think it could be a liability issue. So we had to adjust it a little bit, but the idea of like size or how big you want to build this thing, there's no limits, big or small, is the point. Okay. The craftsmanship matters, of course. I want these to be like something that you could put in the consignment store, something you want to keep. I've mentioned that a few times because I almost want to will it to be true, right? I want you guys to really focus on the quality and think about the time. I'm giving you almost double the amount of time on this project that I do the other projects. And so it's something, uh, and it's almost double the what it's worth in terms of points. So this is the part. Let me pause. Do you guys have any questions about Project 4 so far? It's it's pretty, make a container, make a good container that has your voice, that seems like you, uh, and don't spend any money, and you'll come up with something interesting. So here's the problem that I've seen in the past. The problem is sometimes students have a hard time getting started, right? They can't get moving. So I give you an extra week on the the initial idea, and so you'll have plenty of time. So you have 2 weeks before the first progress check. So the way the timing goes is that you'll have a week to do the checklist, right? During that time, during the checklist, I want you to start collecting materials. Even if you don't think you're going to use it, the ideal uh, way to approach this is just start collecting stuff, put it in a big pile, and photograph it. And that's going to be what I'll ask for the first checkpoint is what materials did you get? What are you thinking about using? Your ideas so far. And then the second checkpoint is you've started the project, you're into it, you have your idea is set, and you're just working towards it. The third progress check is you should be mostly done with it and starting to wrap it up. And that's a week before it's due. And then the final, not a full week, maybe I think it's I'll have to check, but then you have plenty of time. Then it's due, and then when you turn it in, that's it. That's the semester. You don't have to do anything else. So, in a way, if you want to get started and if you finish early on this project, you're done with the project, you're done with the semester. So, and then this is the part where I think I'm going to try the video responses. So as you guys turn in your progress, I'm going to try the harmonize thing. And there's also another voice. I think it's not voice thread. Maybe it's voice thread. Do any of your instructors use like voice thread where they no? Okay. All right. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it and see if it works out. If you guys, uh, I'll try it if I can get it. I'm not sure if how it's gonna work with Canvas. I'll try to install it, and then I'll try it during your progress checks. And then if you hate it, just let me know, and then we'll go from there. How about that? All right. So that's it. The last thing I want to talk about is the end of the semester. So the the grading, a lot of times. So I've looked through the grading, and there's a few of you that are like maybe three of you that are right between a B and an A, and all that's going to take to get to an A is doing a few extra credits, right? And remember, the extra credits are easy. You can go to a museum and just write your name on receipt, the ticket stub. You can find bad examples of design in your world and just take a picture, send it to me, tell me why you think it's bad design. That's extra credit. And uh, those two, you can find examples of bad architecture, right? So those McMansions, McMansions are just poorly crafted houses. You can take pictures of those, and if you can describe how it's bad design, then I'll give you extra credit. So there's multiple ways to get extra credit. Um, just let me know, uh, and I'll let me tell you this too. So I like to be perfectly crystal clear about people's grades. So if you're not sure of what your grade is, let me know. And then the one thing about uh, Canvas is that sometimes it'll give you a misread. And also, Canvas isn't really, you can sort of, like if you, uh, if you get to the point total at the end and you're above 90, you're gonna get an A. One thing is I want you to know is that the Canvas isn't the final grade. So you might get an 80, say you get an 88%. Um, I might look back and say, oh, this person was really helpful in the comments, in the discussions. And I'll give you a participation grade where it's like, I'll just bump up your grade, right? Just because you engaged in the class and you were helpful, and that makes for a better class. So in a way, I try to make it so that if you're engaged and you're friendly and you're a decent person, you get a little bit of a bump at the end, right? If that makes sense. And I think that's it. So if you have any question about your grade, just contact me and I'll tell you exactly what you need to do to make an A or to make a B. I don't think anybody's struggling to pass, but if that's the case, first of all, if that's the case, you're probably not watching this. But if you're struggling to pass, contact me and we have 6 weeks or whatever, 5 weeks, and we'll make a path for you so that you can pass somehow, right? I'll just say you have to do this, this, and this, and that way it's completely clear. Okay? Okay, so this is our last meeting. This is the last time we'll talk like this, but it won't be the last time you'll see me. I'll be in touch. I'm gonna try and make these videos where kind of responsive videos, and just so that I can try to be more engaged with your projects as you go through. But if you have any questions at all about your grade, about your project, um, this is sort of a odd one, but if there's something in your life that's causing you not to perform well in my class, then let me know. We can talk it over and come up with some strategy. I don't want to know a lot about your life. Like I don't want to know too much, but if there's something interfering with the class, then we can talk about it and figure out a path forward. Okay? All right. Good luck with it. And keep in touch if you have any questions. Okay? All right. Have a good week.